Darius Langston stood at the edge of the ballroom, fingers clenched around his bourbon glass, eyes locked on the dance floor. His gaze wasn't subtle, and Ayanna Carter, his executive assistant for 3 years, noticed it right away. "You're staring again," she said, her voice low but sharp as she stepped beside him. Clipboard in hand, still breathless from the last dance. "I observe," Darius replied, jaw tense, not taking his eyes off Terence Blake, who was now laughing with a group of donors near the orchestra pit. Ayanna tilted her head. "Right. And what exactly are you observing about my friend?" Darius finally turned to her, the usual coolness in his deep brown eyes, sharp as cut obsidian. "Your friend looks real, comfortable for someone who's a guest at my event. Terence was invited. Darius, Miss Geneva Braxton brought him." Ayanna's voice was professional, but her eyes had that flicker he'd seen before, equal parts warning and weariness. "Is there a problem?" Darius hated the way Mr. Langston sounded coming from her lips. It only came out when she was angry or making a point in front of people with power. Tonight, in a room full of Detroit's black elite business moguls, philanthropists, city leaders, it felt like a wall between them. "No problem," he muttered, finishing his bourbon. "As long as your friend remembers this ain't a social club." Ayanna stepped closer, voice lower now. "What's really going on?" "The merger announcement went smooth, the investors are thrilled, and the press is already calling you the next Quincy Shaw. Everything's going better than planned. Everything except watching you dance with him." He didn't say it. Instead, he straightened his suit and gave her the expression he'd been perfecting since his first million. "I'm fine, Ayanna, just tired." "You, tired at an event?" she scoffed. "You live for these rooms." She studied his face with the same intense focus. She brought to managing his impossible schedule and corralling boardroom chaos. And for a second, Darius almost said it. The truth that she had become the one thing in his world that wasn't calculated or cold. But then Terence showed up smooth, relaxed, and familiar, with one hand resting lightly on Ayanna's arm, like it had always belonged there. "Sorry to interrupt," Terence said with that easy grin Darius already hated. "Ayanna, the auction's starting. Miss Braxton sent me to find you." Ayanna turned toward him, all warmth and comfort. "Of course." She looked back at Darius. "Darius, this is Terence Blake. We grew up in South Atlanta together." Terence extended a hand. "The famous Darius Langston. Ayanna talks about you all the time." Darius shook it. It was a strong hand, calloused, real, not like his own soft, from years behind screens and power lunches. "All good things, I hope." "She says you're brilliant." "And impossible." Terence chuckled. "Sounds about right for a tech mogul." The words landed like a punch Darius hadn't braced for. He watched Ayanna really laugh, and something twisted in his chest. He'd never made her laugh like that. "I should go help with the auction," Ayanna said, stepping between them. "Try not to kill each other while I'm gone." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Darius standing alone with a stranger, who somehow felt like a threat in every possible way. "She's amazing, isn't she?" Terence said, watching her disappear into the crowd. "Always has been. Even when we were kids, smartest person in every room." Darius nodded once, couldn't trust his voice. Of course she was brilliant. He'd known that for 3 years. But hearing another man say it's someone who'd known her longer, deeper, felt like a door slamming shut on something he never even got to walk through. "How long you'd known her?" he asked, hating how badly he needed the answer. "Since we were 10. Her family moved in next to my nana's house," Terence said with a smile full of memory. "She's the first girl who ever beat me at chess. 20 years." Darius had known Ayanna for 3. Thought he'd seen everything that made her who she was, but Terence had roots with her. History, inside jokes and scars, Darius could never reach. "Excuse me," Darius said suddenly. "I need to check on something." He left before Terence could reply, heading toward his study, his chest hollowing out with each step. And in that empty hallway between soft jazz and laughter, he heard something that stopped him cold. Darius paused outside the double doors of the library, his hand hovering just above the polished brass handle. Inside, two familiar voices sliced through the quiet, low, urgent, dangerous. "The board meeting's already scheduled for next week," said Lionel Graves, his gravelly baritone unmistakable. "Good," replied Monique Russell, newer to the board, but twice as vicious. "We'll have him out before month's end." Darius felt the air leave his lungs. "About time," Monique continued. "Langston's been moving company funds like it's his personal checkbook. That scholarship program of his, that's going to be the nail in his coffin." The breath Darius had been holding turned to ice. They knew. They knew about the scholarships. The one thing he'd kept off the books, but never out of conscience. They knew about the $500,000 he'd quietly funneled over 3 years to give 12 brilliant but underprivileged black students, including Ayana's younger brother, Jamal, a shot at college, a shot the system never would have given them. "They've already got the lawyers reviewing the disbursements," Monique added, her voice dripping with calculation. "That's unauthorized charitable giving, and it's more than enough to push him out." Darius backed away slowly, heart thundering, mind racing. Not just because of the betrayal, but because the fallout wouldn't just hit him, it would hit Ayana too. If the board dug too deep, if they exposed Jamal's name, she'd know everything. She'd know the secret he'd kept hidden since the day her eyes filled with tears when that scholarship letter arrived. Back in the ballroom, everything glittered, the jazz band crooning, guests sipping champagne, the illusion of control still intact. Ayana moved through the crowd with her usual effortless grace. Clipboard, gone now. Replaced with her laugh, and that soft light she carried in every room. She belonged here. More than he ever had, and in that moment, standing at the edge of his own empire, Darius realized just how close he was to losing everything. Not just the company. Her. "Mr. Langston," a voice cut in, snapping him from his thoughts. A waiter held out a fresh glass of bourbon, compliments of the house. Darius took it, fingers tight around the glass. Even though his hands didn't feel steady anymore. Across the room, Ayana had returned to the dance floor back into arms. Their bodies moved in sync, slow and intimate. The way she leaned into him, the way Terence said something in her ear that made her blush. It hit Darius like a sucker punch. He'd never heard her speak Spanish before. 3 years working side by side, and he'd never asked about her roots, her family, the sacrifices that brought her here. That man knew her history. Darius only knew her calendar. "Beautiful party," said a voice beside him. He turned to see Miss Geneva Braxton, regal, in a silver floor-length gown, watching him with shrewd eyes, the 72-year-old widow of a jazz legend and one of his foundation's top donors. Didn't miss a thing. "Thank you," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "Ayana deserves most of the credit." "She's a treasure," Geneva agreed. "You're lucky to have her." Have. That word didn't sit right in his chest. He didn't have Ayana, he paid her. And somewhere along the way, he'd started forgetting the difference. "She's capable," he said, defaulting to safe. Geneva chuckled. "Child, that's like calling Nina Simone a decent singer." She nodded toward the dance floor. "Though I suspect you're finally noticing some of her other qualities." Heat crept up Darius's neck. "I don't know what you mean." "Of course you don't," Geneva said, patting his arm. "Men like you build empires, and still can't see what's standing right in front of them." On the floor, Terence spun Ayana, her emerald gown catching the low lights. She laughed, again head thrown back, eyes alive. Terence whispered something in her ear, and Darius watched her nod. Her smile softer now. He'd never made her smile like that. "Excuse me," he told Geneva, and set down the drink. He walked toward them with no plan, no strategy, just a sharp, desperate pull in his chest. The song ended the moment he reached them. Perfect timing, or terrible. "Mind if I cut in?" The words left his mouth with more calm than he felt. Terence stepped back, polite, of course. "Thanks for the dance, Soph." Ayana looked surprised, hesitating for only a breath before placing her hand in Darius's. Her skin was warm, familiar. But it had never felt like this. "You don't dance," she said, voice low. "I'm full of surprises." The orchestra started another slow tune. Around them, couples moved closer. Darius pulled her in, just enough to blur the line between professional and personal. Is everything okay? Ayanna asked, searching his face. Different, he replied. That's what you're thinking. She didn't deny it. He glanced at her, at the woman he'd trusted with his entire life, except the part that mattered most. Just thinking about the future of Langston Tech. The merger's locked in. I reviewed all the contracts twice. She believed in his decisions. Always had, but Darius couldn't hold on to that belief when everything underneath was about to collapse. What do you think about change? He asked. Ayanna tilted her head. I think change is inevitable. You either embrace it, or it breaks you. Wise words. Words from someone who'd already survived harder changes than he ever had. And loyalty? He asked, before he could stop himself. Her eyes didn't waver. Loyalty has to be earned, and it goes both ways. Their eyes met, and the whole world shrank. The ballroom, the board, the betrayal, it all vanished in that look. 3 years, one dance, and everything unsaid between them was suddenly standing center stage. The music ended. Terrence appeared again. Sorry to break up the moment, boss man, but I promised Ayanna's grandmother I'd get her home before midnight. Family dinner tomorrow. Another piece of her life Darius had never been part of. He let go of her hand slowly. Of course, he said, masking everything behind a polished smile. Thank you for the dance, Miss Carter. She flinched, just slightly, but enough. Thank you for the lovely evening, Mr. Langston, she replied. And then, they were gone. Her dress swaying with every step, his arm around her back at the door. Terrence whispered something that made her laugh and she glanced back at Darius. Just once, with an expression he couldn't read, and then she disappeared, leaving Darius alone in a room full of people who didn't know him, and one woman who suddenly, painfully, did. Monday morning came with a heaviness that weighed down Darius Langston's chest. The clock on his office wall blinked 6 a.m., but he'd been up for hours restless, pacing, staring at legal documents that confirmed what he'd feared the moment he overheard Lionel and Monique. The board had the votes. And the scholarship programs. The one thing he'd done purely from the heart was now the weapon they would use to bring him down. By Friday, Darius might be out of Langston Tech, stripped of the company he built from scratch, labeled a fraud. Worse, Ayanna might find out the truth from the wrong people. She arrived at 7:30 a.m. sharp, like she always did, carrying 2 coffees, hers with almond milk and cinnamon, his black and strong. Without asking, she placed the second cup on his desk. You're here early even for you, she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Rough weekend. Darius looked up from the paperwork, his eyes locking on her face. There was a glow to her, faint, but there was a softness in her cheeks that hadn't been there on Friday. Did you have a good time with Terrence? The words came out sharper than he intended. Ayanna raised an eyebrow and eased into the chair across from him, tablet already in hand. He took me to dinner. South Atlanta, the old neighborhood. She tilted her head slightly. Why do you ask? Just making conversation. You don't make conversation about my personal life. She flipped open her tablet. The Randall contract's ready for signature, and your lunch with the Japanese investors moved to 2 o'clock. He tried to focus, but the words were smearing across his mind, blurred by fear, regret, and something dangerously close to heartbreak. Darius, she said, the warning tone clear. What's going on with you? You've been off since Saturday. He opened his mouth. He could tell her. The truth was right there, how the board was plotting, how her brother's scholarship was the reason, how it was all crashing down around them. But instead, he said, I'm fine. Then signed the top document without even reading it. Ayanna snatched it up before the ink had dried. This is a bulk order for office supplies. You just approved 10,000 stapulars. Darius flinched. In 3 years, he had never made a mistake. Like that, I'll fix it, she said gently, sliding the correct contract toward him. But you're going to tell me what's really going on. His phone buzzed. Text from Elijah Moore, his lawyer. Emergency board meeting. 1 hour. Get ready. It was happening faster than expected. I have to go, Darius said, standing abruptly. Cancel everything on my schedule. Darius, wait. She moved around the desk to stop him, her presence so close, so grounding. He almost buckled. Whatever this is, we can handle it, she said, her voice low, steady. We always do. That word we. When had she become the center of his storm? When had her faith in him become the only thing holding him upright? Some things can't be fixed, he muttered, shrugging into his jacket. Try me. He stopped at the door. Ayanna stood framed in the morning light. Her hair pulled back, her expression fierce and afraid at the same time. She looked like a promise he didn't deserve. Not everything, Ayanna, not this time. Then he left, her silence chasing him down the hallway. The lawyer's office was cold, modern, and sterile, like a surgical room. Elijah laid out the board's case like an autopsy. Every piece of evidence another cut to Darius's legacy. The scholarship program was never authorized by the board, Elijah said. $500,000, traced back to company accounts, signed off by you personally. They were need-based. Darius muttered, 12 students, bright, deserving. Intentions don't matter here, Elijah replied. It's about process, fiduciary responsibility. They could press criminal charges. The words landed hard. Criminal charges and my options. Negotiate a quiet resignation with a severance. Or fight it and risk it all, public humiliation. Legal action, complete loss of your company and reputation. Neither option saved what mattered most, and neither protected Ayanna. He returned to the office just after noon. The glass doors too. His suite opened to silence until he stepped inside and saw her waiting. Ayanna was in his chair, arms crossed, a look on her face that dared him to lie again. Your 1 o'clock rescheduled. Your 2 o'clock is in conference B, she said, coolly. And I've been sitting here for 40 minutes, trying to figure out why my boss looks like the world just ended. She stood. Talk to me. Darius walked past her to the window. The skyline stretched before him, the same city he once ruled. Now, it felt like it was slipping away. What if I told you, I made decisions that felt right at the time, but might destroy everything we've built? Ayanna moved to stand beside him. I'd say that sounds like every decision you've ever made. The question is, did you do it for the right reasons? Darius thought of Jamal, of the tears in Ayanna's eyes when she told him her brother got into Howard. I thought so, he said quietly. Then we figure it out, she replied, no hesitation. Like we always do, we. Again. He turned to her, studying the unwavering determination in her gaze. What if figuring it out means losing everything anyway? Ayanna stepped closer. He could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes now. Then. At least, she said softly, we lose it together. The words hit like truth wrapped in grace. For 3 years, she'd been his anchor, his shield, his partner in everything except name. He opened his mouth to speak. Ayanna, his phone buzzed again. Elijah Board moved the meeting up. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., it's done. Darius stared at the message. 24 hours left. He turned to her. The one person who deserved the truth. Ayanna, he said, voice raw, we need to talk. Ayanna's face went still, the warmth fading as concern took over. She watched Darius with the same intensity she used to dissect hostile contracts and high-stakes negotiations. What is it? She asked. Darius didn't look at her right away. He couldn't. The board is voting to remove me tomorrow morning, he said finally, each word scraping against his throat like gravel. They're using the scholarship program as grounds for misconduct. Ayanna's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. She stepped closer instead, her hand rising, then pausing mid-air, like she wasn't sure if she had permission to touch him. What? Why? He turned away from her gaze. They say I moved company funds without authorization. That it was a breach of fiduciary responsibility. And the scholarships, they're calling it unauthorized giving, Darius said bitterly. $500,000 over 3 years. Ayanna's brow furrowed. But Jamal's scholarship, you're saying? Darius didn't answer with words. He just looked at her. Every unspoken thing hanging in the air between them. Ayana's hand flew to her mouth. Her voice trembled. That was you. All this time, you paid for my brother's education. Darius nodded once. Her expression shifted. From shock, to disbelief, to something sharper. I thought he thought it was a random selection. He cried when he opened that letter. We all did. We thought it was God's favor, or, I couldn't tell you, Darius said, stepping forward. You would have felt obligated. Or worse, like you owed me something. You don't get to decide how I feel about my family's future, Ayana snapped, the heat in her voice catching him off guard. You don't get to play savior behind closed doors and expect gratitude when the truth comes out. I wasn't trying to be a savior, Darius said. I was trying to help. Ayana's laugh was hollow. Help. That's what you call it. She moved behind his desk now, pacing, her composure cracking with every step. 3 years, Darius, 3. And you never once thought I deserved to know. You thought, what that? We were some kind of charity case you could fix with money. It wasn't like that then. What was it like? She demanded, stopping dead in front of him. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you decided my family needed saving, and crowned yourself the one to do it. The accusation cut deeper than any board vote ever could because it was coming from her. I care about you, he said, voice low. I care about your family. I didn't do this to control why. Did it because watching you sacrifice yourself for everyone else while pretending you didn't need help was eating me alive. Ayana stared at him, jaw clenched. You care about me, she repeated, the words flat, heavy. Is that what this is? Before he could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed. The fury gave way to confusion, then concern, then something that looked dangerously like fear. What is it? Darius asked. Ayana looked up slowly. Terence. He's asking about the Yamamoto merger. Darius froze. What about it? Specifics, financial projections, numbers that haven't gone public yet. Her voice dropped. Stuff only you, me, and a few legal folks have seen. A chill ran through Darius. You didn't. I never talked to him about work, she said firmly. Not one detail, not ever. Darius was already turning to his computer. If this was what it looked like, if Terence Blake was involved in something deeper, it would be in the records. It had to be, he typed furiously. Blake, Terence. Atlanta Langston competitors. A page of search results exploded across the screen. Darius narrowed his eyes. Terence Blake. Recently employed by Graves Consulting Group, subcontracted under Lionel Graves. Ayana's voice dropped to a whisper. That's not possible. He worked on mergers, Seattle, Boston, Miami. All 3 had leaks before their deals closed. All 3 lost market share. Ayana sat down, slowly, like her body was giving up on her. He said he moved back last month. Found me on social media, said he never forgot me. When was the last time you saw him before that? She opened her mouth, closed it. High school graduation, she whispered. 15 years ago. Darius clicked another link. The file showed Terence's specialty, corporate intelligence, infiltration, and data gathering via personal connections. Ayana put her hand over her mouth. He played me, she whispered. Every memory, every story, every moment he studied my family like we were a damn case file. I'm sorry, Darius said, voice rough. I'm sorry I didn't see it coming. Should've don't, Ayana interrupted, standing. Don't apologize for him. Her face was pale now, rage and shame mixing behind her eyes. I need to go home, I need to think. Ayana, wait, she paused at the door, looking back at him. Her voice cracked. Can we really fix this, Darius, or are we both just too good at keeping secrets to ever trust each other again? Then she was gone. And for the second time in 3 days, Darius Langston stood alone in the wreckage of the life he'd tried so hard to control. His phone buzzed. Text, message. From Terence. Thanks for a great evening, Ayana, can't wait to see you again soon. Sent to the wrong number, Darius stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. He forwarded the message to Elijah with a note, "Get this, to legal now, because tomorrow he'd fight the board. But tonight he was going to fight for Ayanna." Carter couldn't sit still. Her apartment, usually a space of order and comfort, now felt like a box closing in. She paced between the kitchen and living room, every sound echoing too loudly. Every breath too shallow. Everything she thought she understood had been flipped upside down in 48 hours. Marcus-no. Darius had been secretly funding her brother's scholarship. Out of love, he claimed, out of care, but without trust. And Terence. Terence had been a lie from the beginning. Her phone buzzed. Again. Terence. Her stomach clenched. She almost let it ring, but anger won out. "Hello, hey, beautiful," he said, too casual, too smooth. "I was thinking dinner tomorrow. There's this new Caribbean spot in Midtown, you'll love it." Ayanna's fingers tightened around the phone. "I can't, I'm busy." "Busy with work," he chuckled. "Come on, Soph, even workaholics need to eat." "Terence," she said firmly, "I need to ask you something, and I want the truth." A pause. "Of course. What is it? Do you work for Graves Consulting?" Silence. Dead air. When he finally spoke, the warmth was gone. "Sophia, answered the question," she snapped. "Yes or no? Were you sent here to get information on Langston Tech?" Another pause. "It's complicated." "No, it's simple." Her voice was shaking now. "You approached me. You used our past. You used my family. Was it all fake?" There was a sigh on the other end, low, calculated. Harrison pays well. And Darius Langston's empire was already cracking. "I just helped speed up the process." Ayanna's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the couch. "So none of it was real. The stories, the memories. I researched you, Ayanna. I knew what to say, what to remember. But that doesn't mean I didn't care. I do care. The feelings were real. You manipulated me," she whispered. "You used me. I gave you a way out," Terence said coldly. "You're brilliant. You deserve better than running behind a man like Langston who doesn't even know what he has. Don't talk about him like that. I'm just being real. You think he's gonna protect you when this blows up? He can't even protect himself." Ayanna closed her eyes. Images of Darius flooded her mind. His voice when he admitted the board was voting him out. His expression when he confessed the scholarship, the vulnerability she'd never seen before. "He made mistakes," she said quietly. "But he didn't lie to manipulate me. And he didn't come into my life just to use me. He's going down, Ayanna, and he's going to take you with him. You still have a choice. Come to Seattle, start fresh." She didn't hesitate. "No, Ayanna, no, Terence. I won't be part of destroying someone who's trying to do the right thing. You already are. Everything you've said, little thing you let slip is being used to take him down. It's too late." Ayanna felt her stomach turn. "I have to go." She hung up. Her chest ached. Her body trembled. She had given Terence her trust-shared memories. Moments. Her heart, and he'd weaponized every piece. She grabbed her jacket. There was only one person who deserved her honesty. Now her phone buzzed again. Text from Darius. "I'm outside your building. We need to talk." Ayanna walked to the window. There he was, Darius Langston, standing next to his car, in a grey suit. Hands shoved into his pockets, his usual confidence stripped away. He looked like a man holding his breath, hoping for a second chance she could have stayed inside, but she was done running. Ayanna pulled on her coat and stepped into the cold night air. Darius straightened as soon as he saw her coming down the steps. His heart pounded like it wanted to break free from his chest, but he kept his expression guarded. Ayanna walked toward him slowly, arms folded tightly, eyes unreadable. "You came down," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You looked ridiculous standing out here alone," she said flatly, stopping a few feet away. "What do you want, Darius?" "I want to explain. I want to apologize. I want to tell you the truth about everything." Ayanna's gaze didn't soften. "To fix what?" "The board meeting. The fact that you secretly handled my brother's future. Like it was your responsibility." The secrets, the lies. Darius exhaled. All of it, none of it. I don't know. He rubbed a hand over his face, his voice growing more urgent. I just know one thing. Losing Langston Tech doesn't scare me half as much as the thought of losing you. Ayana's breath hitched. She tried to keep her guard up, but something flickered in her eyes. That's a pretty sentiment, she said. But it doesn't undo what you did. You made decisions about my family's life without even telling us. You chose silence over trust. You're right, he said. I did. He stepped closer, but Ayana, the reason I helped Jamal wasn't about power or control. I saw how much you were carrying. You skipped lunch to send money home, stayed late to work overtime. You carried your whole family on your back, and still showed up every day to make me look good. His voice cracked. And somewhere along the way, your happiness became more important to me than my own. Ayana stared at him, her chest rising and falling with emotion. Darius, I'm in love with you, he said. I have been, for longer than I can admit. And I know I've done everything wrong. But the love behind it, that was always real. The words hung between them like smoke in the night air. Ayana shook her head slowly. You don't get to say that now. Not when everything's broken. I'm not saying it to fix anything, he replied. I'm saying it because it's the truth. Because tomorrow morning, I might not have anything left to fight for except you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick folder. These are the records, every payment, every name, every dollar I gave to that scholarship fund, 12 students, Ayana, not just Jamal. He handed it to her gently. I never filed any of it as charitable deductions. I never told a soul, except the scholarship committee and my accountant. Didn't do it for credit. I did it because opportunity matters. Because education changes lives. Ayana opened the folder, her hands trembling. Names, faces, transcripts, receipts, lives changed, quietly, silently. She looked up at him, tears gathering but not falling. The board thinks this is embezzlement, she said softly. I don't care what they think, Darius replied. What matters to me is what you think. She studied him, the arrogance stripped away. The empire builder, now just a man standing in the cold hoping, waiting. I think you're a fool, she whispered. A damn fool for not telling me. For assuming you knew what my family needed. She stepped closer. But I also think you did it. Because you love me, and you didn't know how else to show it. Darius laughed under his breath, a sound more like relief than joy. Exactly that. Ayana looked down at the folder, then back at him. So what now? He inhaled slowly. The board meeting is at 10 a.m. Elijah wants me to settle, walk away, take the severance. She raised an eyebrow. And what do you want to do? I want to fight. I want to show them what this program really meant. I want to prove that doing the right thing quietly shouldn't be punished. I want to save Langston Tech. She nodded once. Then we fight. Darius blinked. We. Ayana smiled through the tears she'd been holding back. You said. You wanted honesty. Here's mine. She took a deep breath. I've been in love with you for 2 years. I stayed in this job longer than I should have because I kept hoping you'd see me as more than your assistant. And despite your emotional constipation and terrible communication skills, I'd rather fight this with you than walk away wondering what we could have been. Darius laughed, choked by emotion. Emotional constipation. It's a clinical term, Ayana smirked. Look it up. He stepped forward slowly and cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle, reverent. I love you, he whispered. I should have said it sooner, should have said it better, should have said it 1,000 times. Ayana silenced him with a kiss. It wasn't perfect or practiced, it was 3 years of buried emotion finally released. It was fierce and soft, trembling and certain. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Ayana rested her forehead against his. We have 8 hours, she whispered. 8 hours to build a case, he replied. A case that proves love and loyalty aren't misconduct. Darius nodded. With you by my side, I think we can do anything. They stood in the cold October night, not as boss and assistant, but as two people who had chosen truth finale over fear. Tomorrow, the battle for Langston Tech would begin, but tonight, they had each other. The boardroom was silent as Darius Langston and Ayanna Carter stepped through the double doors at exactly 9:58 a.m. He wore his signature charcoal suit. Freshly pressed, but his usual air of control had been replaced with something Ayanna walked beside him, poised and steady, holding the thick folder of scholarship records like it was a weapon forged from truth. Lionel Graves sat at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by Monique Russell and the rest of the board. They looked up with the faintest flickers of discomfort as Ayanna took the seat to Darius's right. "Morning," Darius said calmly. "Let's get to it." Elijah Moore, seated at the far end of the table, cleared his throat. Per the emergency vote called by board members Graves and Russell, the purpose of this meeting is to review allegations regarding misuse of company funds related to the LHden Foundation Scholarship Program. "Allegations I am prepared to answer," Darius said. Lionel leaned back, folding his arms. "We've reviewed the records, $500,000 in company funds, redirected without proper board authorization. That's more than a technical breach. It's cause for termination." Darius didn't blink. "You're missing context." He nodded at Ayanna. She stood and began distributing copies of the documents she had meticulously organized overnight. These records show the full breakdown of how the funds were allocated 12 students over 3 years, all from underrepresented backgrounds, all meeting rigorous academic criteria. "Criteria approved by whom?" Monique asked. Darius raised a hand. "By me. As CEO, I have discretionary power over charitable initiatives within a capped threshold. Every individual payment was beneath that threshold. I simply didn't flag them to the board because I didn't want credit." "Or accountability," Lionel muttered. "No," Ayanna cut in, her voice slicing through the room like steel. "Because he believed in making a difference quietly. He believed education changes lives, and he was right." "Elijah," Darius said, turning to his lawyer, "please provide the board with the supplemental tax documents." Elijah slid the packet across the table. "As you can see, Mr. Langston never claimed any of these donations on his personal or business taxes. There was no attempt at self-enrichment, in fact, quite the opposite." Silence fell again. Darius leaned forward. "You want to fire me for giving 12 kids, including Ayanna's younger brother, shot at a better future? Fine, but I won't let you call that misconduct. I won't let you spin generosity into criminality just because you didn't know it was happening." Monique shifted uncomfortably. Lionel said nothing. Ayanna stood again, her voice even. "Langston Tech has always prided itself on innovation. Isn't it time our board understood that innovation means more than technology? It means changing lives, empowering communities, and, yes, breaking the mold." She paused. "You can vote him out, but the story won't be what you think. It won't be embezzlement, it'll be a headline about a black CEO who dared to care." Lionel opened his mouth, but Elijah held up a hand. "Before we proceed with any vote," the lawyer said, "you should also be aware of a potential conflict of interest." He slid a final document onto the table. Harrison Graves Consulting was recently connected to an industrial espionage investigation. Specifically, an operative named Terrence Blake who, until a week ago, was in personal contact with Miss Carter and was gathering information related to Langston Tech's mergers. Monique sat up straighter. Lionel's face darkened. "That connection implicates board member Graves in a separate ethics inquiry," Elijah continued, "and calls into question the motivations behind this meeting." Gasps rippled around the room. Darius didn't smile, but Ayanna saw the glint of satisfaction in his eyes. "You wanted a vote," he said. "Fine, let's vote." But no one raised a hand, no one spoke, and slowly, one by one, the board members began gathering their papers in silence. Elijah stood. "This meeting is over." Darius exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. Ayanna reached over and touched his hand. "Not bad for a couple hours prep," she said softly. Darius turned to her, his voice low. couldn't have done it without you. They left the boardroom side-by-side partners in truth, in purpose, and in something far deeper than either had ever imagined. That night, Darius stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring out over downtown Detroit. The city lights flickered beneath a cloudy October sky. But all he could see was Iona, her fire, her faith, her refusal to let him fall alone. He hadn't seen her since they left the boardroom. She'd gone back to her apartment to rest. She'd looked tired, but when she turned to him at the elevator, she had squeezed his hand and said, "Call me when you're ready to talk about everything." He was ready now. He picked up his phone and texted her, "I need to see you tonight." Less than a minute later, her reply came, "I'm already on my way." 15 minutes later, she was at his door. She wore jeans, a brown sweater, and no makeup, but to Darius, she looked like salvation in human form. The wind had tousled her curls. She didn't try to fix them. She stepped inside, the door clicking softly behind her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Iona set her purse down and walked toward him slowly. So the board's quiet, the scandal's shifting. Elijah Sias Lionel might get booted himself. Darius nodded. "Yeah, and I might actually still have a company tomorrow." She stopped a few feet away, folding her arms. "And what about us, Darius? Where does that leave us?" He swallowed hard. "I don't want to live in a world where we go back to the way things were. Boss and assistant. Guarded. Distant. Pretending like we don't see each other." Iona looked at him, her eyes deep with exhaustion and truth. "Can't work beside you anymore, not if I have to keep pretending to." "You won't," Darius said quickly. "Because I'm done pretending." He walked over to his desk and pulled out a sleek black envelope. He handed it to her. She opened it and found a letter of resignation. Hers already signed. "What is this?" "It's your release," Darius said. "From any sense of obligation to stay with the company. From any pressure to keep this professional." Her eyebrows rose. "You're firing me." "I'm giving you freedom," he said. "To choose this sus without it being tied to your paycheck." She looked at the letter, then back at him. "And what if I don't want freedom? What if I want work?" Darius stepped closer. "Then I'm the one who's free because, for the first time, I don't have to hide how I feel." Iona's voice softened. "You know this won't be easy. People will talk." "Let them," he said, brushing a curl from her cheek. "I've spent my whole life building walls. You're the only one who ever looked at me and saw the man behind them." Her eyes glistened. "Do you really love me, Darius?" she whispered. He cupped her face gently. "I love your mind, your strength, your loyalty, the way you speak truth even when it burns. I love the way you reorganized my entire system on your second week and told me I was inefficient." He smiled. "I love you, Iona Carter, all of you." A tear slid down her cheek. "I love you too," she whispered. "But if you ever hide something from me like that again, you have full permission to throw a stapler at me." She laughed, the sound ringing through the room like healing. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he finally understood what it meant to have something worth losing and worth fighting for. The city hummed below them, but inside, everything was finally quiet. 2 years later, Iona Langston, formerly Carter, stood near the edge of the ballroom at the newly renamed Langston Carter Foundation Gala, watching the room pulse with music, laughter, and possibility. Black excellence filled every corner of the Metropolitan Museum, from scholarship recipients and their proud families to industry leaders and activists who had once called Darius a liability. Now, they called him a visionary. She wore a flowing deep gold gown tonight, her hair curled and pinned back in soft waves. On her finger sparkled a diamond that caught the chandelier lights like it was made to shine under pressure, just like her. From the stage, Darius's smooth baritone echoed across the room, confident and grounded. 2 years ago, he said, this foundation operated in silence, because I was too proud to admit that giving without credit was the most meaningful work I'd ever done. But tonight, we don't hide. Applause rippled through the crowd. Tonight, he continued, We celebrate 63 young scholars who've shown us that investing in education isn't a favor. It's a responsibility. Ayana's chest swelled with pride as Darius scanned the room and found her face. He smiled softly. And none of this, he said, would have happened without the woman who taught me that the best partnerships are built on honesty, mutual respect, and yes, some occasional yelling. The crowd laughed. My wife, Ayana Langston. More applause. Ayana stepped onto the stage beside him, her hands sliding into his with practiced ease and personal intimacy. She took the microphone. Thank you, Darius, and thank you to everyone who believed in this vision. She turned toward the crowd 4 years ago. My brother Jamal received a scholarship that changed the trajectory of our family. Tonight, he's here not as a recipient, but as Dr. Jamal Carter. Fresh off completing his residency in pediatric surgery, a spotlight lit up Jamal, who stood at his table beaming, his parents beside him both in tears. The applause swelled, again deeper this time, more emotional. Education changes everything, Ayana said. It changed my family's future when we immigrated from Jamaica. It changed my life when I earned my MBA. And it's changing the lives of every student in this room, students who were told they didn't belong in certain spaces, and now own the room. Darius returned to the mic, and before we close out tonight, I want to announce something. He looked at Ayana, then the crowd. Thanks to a new partnership with 3 Black-owned tech firms and our foundation, we're expanding to support 200 students across 5 cities next year. The crowd erupted. Ayana squeezed Darius's hand, remembering every sleepless night they spent drafting proposals, calling board members and building this mission together. And now, Darius said with a grin, my wife owes me a dance. The orchestra struck up a slow jazz number, the same song that had played the night of that infamous gala 2 years ago, when jealousy and silence nearly pulled them apart. Tonight, love and truth had brought them full circle as they danced. Darius pulled her close and whispered, any regrets? Ayana smiled. Just one. I should have thrown that stapler at you sooner. He laughed, real laugh, deep and joyful. How much sooner? About 5 minutes after I reorganized your files and you tried to move them back. I didn't know you were organizing my life too, he said quietly. In every way that mattered. Ayana looked up at him. And you? Any regrets? Darius shook his head. Just one. I should have told you I loved you the moment I saw you walk into that interview room, wearing that blazer 2 sizes too big, and telling me I was 5 minutes late for my own meeting. Ayana laughed, the memory still vivid. You were, and you still owe me for that. I'll spend the rest of my life paying it back, he said. Around them, the ballroom blurred. Scholars danced with parents. Donors made toasts. The future they had once thought impossible now shimmered just within reach, because they had chosen to fight for each other. For truth, for legacy. Ayana leaned into Darius as the song slowed. You were worth fighting for, she whispered. Darius tightened his hold, so were you. After the final applause faded, and the last scholarship recipient hugged their mentor goodnight, Ayana and Darius lingered in the quiet of the now empty ballroom. Only the soft hum of string instruments being packed away remained. The night had been a celebration, a victory, but more than anything, a reflection of what they had built together. Ayana walked over to one of the tall windows, the Detroit skyline glittering beyond. Darius followed, slipping his arms around her waist and resting his chin gently on her shoulder. You remember what this room used to be? He asked. She smiled. A battlefield that night, watching you dance with Terence. He paused, then chuckled. I wanted to fire him, and I didn't even hire him. Ayana turned to face him, her fingers resting lightly on his chest. That night changed everything. And not just because you got jealous. He raised an eyebrow. You're saying my jealousy saved us? No, she whispered. I'm saying your love did. Darius leaned in and kissed her forehead. I spent so long chasing success, Ayana, thinking that money, power, reputation, that those things would finally make me whole. But you You were the first person who didn't want anything from me, except the truth. Ayana touched his cheek. You were always worthy of love, Darius. You just needed someone to see past the fortress you built and break the front gate down with a clipboard and a deadline, he teased. She laughed. Exactly. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that speaks volumes when nothing needs to be said. Then Ayana's voice broke the quiet. What do you think people will say about us? That we broke all the rules. That we risked everything. That we crossed lines we weren't supposed to. Darius nodded. And you know what? They'd be right. Ayana leaned in. But they'll also say, we built something that mattered, something no one could tear down. He tightened his grip on her, voice low. We didn't just save a company, we saved each other. She pulled back slightly, her eyes locking with his. So what now? Darius smiled. Now, we keep building. They walked hand in hand across the room, stepping over memories that once nearly broke them. And as they passed beneath the chandelier, now renamed the Langston Carter Legacy Light, Ayana looked up. You realize, she said, that love turned out to be your best investment. Darius grinned. The only one I never expected returns on. And the only one that made me richer than I ever imagined. They pushed the ballroom doors open and stepped into the crisp night air husband and wife. Partners, visionaries. The city stretched out before them, so did the future. They had turned betrayal into purpose, secrets into truth, and power into love. This wasn't just the end of a story, it was the beginning of a legacy.